Hello and welcome back to round two. So in this I'm going to talk a little bit more about adjusting pivots and playing around with order layers. Now the reason for this video is because I'll often have people that are starting this process and starting to actually program stuff in that run into some technical issues, and so this is going to cover how to address them, how to deal with them, but this also shows kind of a process to help you understand how in games you can set a 2D character to be able to figure out its sorting order relative to its position. So this is an approach. It's not the only way to do it, but it's a way of doing it. All right, so let me shift over to here. Okay, so we've got the character here with some of these props that have been set out. But now we need to figure out how to get this character to move in front of or behind these props as they are in the game. Because just by moving the character down doesn't make it go in front. I have to change that order in the layer somehow. Now, the way I can do that is because I've already got some information about what I need to change. As the character moves down on the screen, this y-axis number goes further into the negative. As it moves up, it goes up in the positive. So up and down into the negative. And so I can use that. As long as I've got the gameplay going below this 0, this works. If it goes up into the positive, then I've got to do some other fancy math. But not too much. It'll still just put it into the negative with the math. But what I can do is I can take this relative position, the 1.22, and because the order in the layer only handles whole numbers, it can't do a decimal, I can do something like 122. And then if I go further down on screen, right here to like 1.4, then I can change this to 140. And so all I'm doing is I'm taking that y-axis position, I'm reversing it so it becomes a negative, or in this case it takes the negative, makes it a positive, and then multiply it by 100 so that I get that decimal moved over, and then I've got the order I can put it in the layer. And by doing this, I can take these other ones, so negative 1.33, so that'll be 133. This is negative 1.15, so this can be 115. And in this way, I can set the sorting based on the character's position. So let me change that to 0.73. But now that this is 1.27, if I adjust that order in the layer to 127, it puts it behind, which is great. So I've got a solution for moving the character around on screen and then being able to update the order in the layer. But there's a couple of places where this is going to be problematic if I don't address the pivot position. Currently, this character has, well, let me jump over this character first. The way this character is designed is that they have their feet planted at the base of their sprite. This character and even these plants don't. They had some extra wiggle around room in case I needed to add some shading or something below the character, so it doesn't go straight to the bottom of the sprite. And so even trying to adjust the pivot just down to the bottom isn't going to work, but I'm going to show you how to do that as well. If you have all your characters where the pivot is aligned with the bottom of their sprite, if I select the character and I go to select the original image over here in the project, if I select that first sprite, I can go to the sprite editor and I can move the pivot down to the bottom center. And when I close that, it'll have me save it. And so when I select the character again, it still looks like it's in the middle. So up here at the top left of the screen, I need to change it from center to pivot. And this will show where the pivot actually is. So now this is aligned with the base of the character in the pivot. Now there's a problem here though. I have to do this for every one of the sprites or this doesn't work. So if I hit play for this animation, you see that it's going to pop down because for this next sprite, the pivot is still in the center. So in addition to doing it in the sprite editor, I can also here under the pivot, change that to bottom and hit apply. And now if I hit play, that'll work. But I had to do it for both sprites to make it work. So this is a way to do this. And so as I move it around now, it'll more accurately align with everything else as long as they have their pivots at the base as well. If it's not, because this is a different size in this plant and the pivots also offset, this character won't sort correctly otherwise. So let me show you that. Let me change both of these back to center to show you what the problem is that we're correcting here. So now if I grab this character and I move them up here, based on where they've been in the order layer, if I come down here to like 1.45, so that should be 145, that brings them in front. But if I look at this plant behind them, that's at 133. So if I go up to right here where they should be behind the plant, that's 140. And I change this to 140, they're still in front. Right now, they should be behind. And so having different size sprites or sprites that have pivots in different locations becomes a problem because it doesn't react correctly. So that's part of the reason that sort order is so important. So I'm going to move this back, apply these changes really fast. I'm going to put it back at the center for now and hit apply. Move that character kind of back up in a position. 1.3. Okay. So let me show you how this works with this other character where the sprite is not necessarily in the correct position. If I need to adjust a character like this, what I can do is, if I, for example, come here and I do bottom center as I did with the other one, select the character again. Once again, if it's still just showing up in the center of the sprite, you need to click that button to make sure it's at the pivot. You see that this is now below the character, so that's not going to work very well. So what I need to do is I need to come back over here under the sprite and open up the sprite editor. And in this case, let me move that back to center for a second. If I grab that pivot here and drag it down, I can middle mouse scroll to zoom in. Align it with the bottom, I can get a rough number. So it looks like 0.11 with however this is calculated, and that was still 0.5. And so if I save that, and you see now it's also changed up here custom. So if I know my numbers, so I can go to the next one and go, hey, this one I should do custom 0.5, 0.11. I can set those up and they'll keep that custom information. So custom 0.5, 0.11, 0.11, hit apply. And actually that was for the previous one, so let me grab the second one now. There we go. There we go. And so I need to set that up for all of them. I'm not going to right now. I'm going to take these back to the center. I'm just showing this is a way that you could do it. So let me take all of these, select this MC again. Double check that they're all back at center. And this has been moved up, so I'll move that back down. Was it negative 1.27, so you can kind of see where it was hanging out. Okay. So while that can work, and in a case like this potted plant, I may do that. If I'm not going to have this animated, I'm not going to have it moving, I just need it to have the base position, then I will just grab it from here over in the project settings. And because I know this was at the same sprite scale as the character, I can do that to that custom 0.5, 0.11, hit apply. And then I can move this down into position. Now I'm going to get the relative position actually correct. 0.56. There we go. And so this will work because the pivot is now at the base. Once again, if it's not showing, change it from center to pivot. However, for something that's animated or just for ease of use, if it helps, there is a better way that I want to show right now. But it's still the same principle of setting up the pivot so that it aligns at the base so we can use that y-axis position as the way of determining the order in the sort layer. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start by hiding this background base so that it's easier to see where that grid is here. But if I go up to the top and I go to Game Object, Create Empty, and I will call this Character Holder, and I'm going to change, or I'm going to reset all of the transforms so that its position is at 0. You see it's right there at the grid. I can take this main character, and rather than going through and dealing with changing each one of these sprites and having to adjust their pivots, I can simply move this character into that character holder, and I am going to reset its transform. So now it's aligned center to center. From there, with just the character selected inside, I can move this up into position. And once again, because of those beautiful whole numbers, I know that I want this to go about 25 pixels up from the center of this thing till where it aligns with the feet. So I can just, on that y-axis, 0.25. And that gets me the 25 pixels up. So now it aligns perfectly in this character holder. So the pivot for the main character sprites are still centered. However, the character holder has its pivot at the base. So if I have this selected and I hit play, it'll still work and be aligned to that base that I can move around. And so the same principle applies. Now that I've got this character holder, and I'm going to turn on this background base again. Oh, make sure I select the character holder. If I move this down and into position, so the pivot's aligned with the bottom, and I can check this plant, its pivot's aligned with the bottom. And by the way, when I select the character, here's another place where you can run into trouble. It's selected that interior MC and not the holder. So make sure that you select the character holder from the hierarchy as you're moving things, because if I had just done this and then moved it around, you see that would throw my numbers way out of whack. So I'll select that holder and move that into position. So I'm actually going to move this over -6.5 to get it behind there a little bit better. If I put this at 1.5, then all I have to do is, instead of grabbing the MC, this main character's y-axis, and feeding that into the order in the layer, I can grab the parent holder's y-axis information, which is currently -1.5, and plug that into the order in the layer, 150. And it will allow me to do the same thing and allow me to control everything from this holder. So, for example, if I move that holder down in front of this other potted plant just a little bit, so 1.58 or something like that, and then change this programmatically to 158, that'll help solve the problem of the sorting and the order of the layers. So hopefully this is giving you an idea of how this can be handled, and hopefully giving you a clue into how this is handled in games in the past. Not exactly this way, but a similar principle. By being able to adjust the sorting order of things within a layer, and being able to help them have different orders, that will allow it to go in front of or behind. Now, some games had a limited number of layers and you had to squeeze everything in, but some games also kind of worked around it to have sorting order within a layer. There are tricks of the trade. Please do your research and look at your favorite classical games and see what you can find about what they did. But for your own fun and play and experimentation, start trying to figure out how you can start putting stuff together. Create backgrounds, create props, start placing them, have fun with it, see what you can do with this stuff. And then for those who are adventurous and want to start exploring programming, there's a lot of great resources on Unity's website. So start looking at how you can create code to move a character around and start interacting with different objects and going through different layers. But have fun playing around with props and backgrounds this week. Next week, I'll come back with some more videos for the next steps. And with next week's videos, I'll try and get some tutorials on how you can do particle effects. Anyways, take care. Bye-bye.